Fam, listen. The shocking truth is that no one knows what's going on when it comes to Anthony Davis. No one, not even Shams Charania. Guys, what a wild day yesterday wound up being. And I really, really wanted to record, but I've been sick the past couple days. It is awesome to be back in the studio. And obviously, could we go very long without talking about Anthony Davis some more? Not a chance. Not a chance. In today's episode, we're going to talk about Anthony Davis. We're going to talk about the game that's happening tonight. Vibes are kind of weird right now. I don't know whether to be excited about this game, especially after the Mavericks had an impressive showing with kind of a bare bones lineup the other day. I don't know to be encouraged about that, or hey guys, can we lose a little bit so we can get our lottery odds up? Anyway, we're going to talk through all of that today. But first, I want to share with you a cautionary tale. My name is Ethan, the advisor Clayton. Welcome to Your Mavs, a Dallas Mavericks podcast where all are welcome. Y'all better behave. And when I say y'all better behave, this is the cautionary tale I want to start with. Friday happens. We get the news about Anthony Davis. You know, he could miss a number of months per Shams Charania. And I was talking to a buddy of mine after that news broke. And I was just kind of making a comment. You can call me delusional in the comment section if you want. I was like, in a number of months is like really, really vague. What if this winds up not being super serious? Like, our title contenders still going to consider trading for Anthony Davis? Like, that was just simply what I said. Didn't say it on this show. Said it to my buddy. And he's like, dude, you're literally so delusional. Nobody wants Anthony Davis. Like, who in the world would trade for Anthony Davis, especially now, right? So it's that time of year where people that aren't front office executives make declarative, absolute statements like that. Like, no one is interested in Anthony Davis, that kind of thing, right? So then Sunday rolls around, the sign line comes out, and the report is that there was never any official offer on the table for Anthony Davis from the Atlanta Hawks. So there was all the posturing stuff about whether or not Reza Shea would ever be included, or whether the Pelicans pick would ever be included. There was all that back and forth stuff. And Steinlein's like, hey, look, line in the sand. There was never any real offer on the table. Okay, well, that kind of made me think, okay, my buddy was a little bit right about what his take was. Like, if there weren't any offers on the table then, why would all of a sudden there be offers on the table? Okay, yeah, things are starting to logically fit. I'm still delusional, so I'm still not letting go of that dream. So then yesterday rolls around, and it's tweeted that Anthony Davis is likely to go the surgical route and be out the rest of the season, miss the rest of his Mavericks season, I believe is how it was worded. Immediately, I get a text from that same buddy. Told you the trade's not happening. Like, homie's out for the rest of the year. I was like, keep reading the tweet. There was more, right? That the second series of that tweet, that Shams bomb. There is renewed trade talks with multiple interested teams. Pause. You mean to tell me that maybe even if there wasn't an offer on the table, that there were multiple teams interested? Okay, box checked. You mean to tell me that the injury could only keep him out 6 weeks, like what was originally reported? Box checked. You mean to tell me that title contenders look at that timeline and think, hey, you know what? That's pretty favorable. Why don't we try and buy low on this all-star player? Box checked. We are so back, right? After that second tweet in that series, right? Like, we are so freaking back. Okay. But then wait, there's more. Anthony Davis chimes in and says, lies. It's all lies. I don't know why y'all listen to all these lies and all these apps. And first off, are we going to pretend for a moment that it wasn't Rich Paul and Clutch Sports that leaked that information to ESPN? Are we going to pretend that? Because if Mavs fans are delusional, I think maybe we can point those fingers back at AD. Like, are you delusional to think that it wasn't your own guy that leaked that to the press? Whatever, we move on. By the way, he hasn't tweeted in since 2022 or something like that. He had been There had been ghost silence from that end for years, and then all of a sudden he gets on Twitter. He's got something to say. And I also thought it was kind of cheesy that he was calling out like local Dallas media. Abby Jones from DLLS Sports, kind of basically retweeted what Shams tweeted. He's like, yeah, it's all lies. I don't know what y'all are talking about. Whatever. Definitely come after local media instead of Shams Charania or instead of, I don't know, Rich Paul. Whatever. We move on. So then a little while later, Mark Stein enters the chat. An adult enters the room, if you will. And instead of the likely to go surgical route, could be out for months, Mark Stein reports there's optimism for a March return, even if he goes the surgical route. Hello. So you mean to tell me he could get the surgery and he could still be back in March? That is not an out for the season type of scenario. So guess what? Ears perk up a little bit. Then Shams has to walk it back in a major, major fashion, right? He's like, okay, after seeking a hand specialist in Los Angeles, like they decided not to go the surgical route. He'll be reevaluated in 6 weeks, I guess, whatever. So yeah, it was a really interesting turn of events. Mark Stein turned out to be like the most accurate reporter in our like domain right now. Said there's optimism for a March return. So now all the delusion, quote unquote, that Mavericks fans had about like, okay, well, if you're a title contender, do you look at that timeline as a favorable thing? And now you get to buy for pennies on the dollar. Turns out we were all justified for feeling the way that we feel, whether you felt that he would never get traded, whether you felt that his trade market disappeared altogether, or if you thought, hey, there's still a chance. No one knows what is going on. Not even Shams Charania. Hilarious stuff. What a shocking development. Then kind of towards the end of the day, there was I guess it didn't happen at the end of the day, but I didn't see it till the end of the day. There was a quote from Tim McMahon. I know Tim McMahon again. Dumont feels no pressure to move Anthony Davis by the trade deadline, right? Going into next season with a healthy AD and a healthy Kyrie Irving, the Cooper Flagg experiment. Like these are all things you've heard before. The Mavs front office, Patrick Dumont is like doubling down on that statement. Why do you think that is, y'all? Let's drum up some interest for our guy. Okay. At the beginning of the day, out for months, untouchable, no team wants that. Renewed trade talks. There's optimism for a March return. But we don't have to move him because we don't feel pressure because it's going to be a really good product. There's a guys, here's my opinion. There is a masterclass going on between what Rich Paul and his camp is putting out there, like leaking to ESPN, and what Patrick Dumont and the Mavericks front office are saying in public. This is a masterclass. They are trying so desperately to move Anthony Davis so that we don't have to like bother with that max contract extension stuff, right? That is what I see happening. Rich Paul is going to move heaven and earth. He's going to paint whatever narrative he has to get things in motion. And that is, in my opinion, what happened yesterday. But that doesn't mean that anybody knows what's actually going on. So before you are tempted to say something rude to somebody like you don't know ball or what a delusional fan, no one would ever. Like, guys, can we just acknowledge that not even a year ago, the Mavericks traded a generational superstar without any warning in the middle of the night? Like, can we stop pretending to know exactly what front office executives are thinking and making all these declarative, absolute statements? This will not happen. This will never. If I'm guilty of that, call me out in the comment section. Like literally, no one knows what is going on. I think that that's hilarious. And before we move on, I have two questions. First one was Shams Charania played the fool by Rich Paul, right? Because in my opinion, it made Shams Charania. I can't even talk right now. It made Shams look kind of dumb, right? Was that intentional? My next question is, was Shams Charania bested by Mark Stein? Is Mark Stein the best in the business? Yeah, I pay for a monthly subscription to his Substack, so I think he's pretty legit. Anywho, I'm going to move on. We spent 10 minutes talking about Anthony Davis again on the Anthony Davis show, but I said we would move on. There's one more thing, promise, and then we'll talk about tonight's game. Bobby Marks, he used to be a front office see, here I go again, getting tongue twisted. He was a front office executive for the Brooklyn Nets for years. Now he is a front office insider for ESPN. He has an inside pulse of what league executives are talking about across the league. He came on the DLS Mavericks show yesterday and talked about hey, if I'm the GM, here's how I think about AD moving forward. So here's where I'm going to throw some bad news. These are not absolute statements. These are not absolute declarations. But Bobby Marks is saying, based off what he's hearing, if AD is to get moved, it's probably just going to be for expiring contracts. We're not talking about a juicy haul of picks. We're not talking about young, exciting players or hot prospects or anything like that. We're talking about expiring contracts. That's what he said. If I am the Mavs GM, I cut my losses, I trade for expiring money, and I move on. Okay. If that's the route the Mavs decide to take, let's talk about 4 teams that have some expiring money to throw at other teams. That's going to be Chicago. That's going to be the Atlanta Hawks. That's going to be the Los Angeles Clippers. And I also am going to highlight the Detroit Pistons for a second. If you look at Chicago's roster, right now they have $80 million of expiring money. $80 million. Okay. And this is going to be attached to players like Vucevic, Zach Collins, Kevin Huerter, Kobe White, Ayo Dosunmu. There's Javon Carter, DeLon Terry, right? Those are all expiring contracts, and you could put 2 or 3 of those together to match AD's salary. I believe they would have to include a smaller third contract in addition to a Vooch and a Kobe White to match that salary. So it's not necessarily easy to get that done with Chicago, but they've got the ability to do those expiring contracts. Then, obviously we've talked about Atlanta for weeks. And by the way, Mavericks fans had a heyday yesterday with the Hawks injury report, right? There was okay, there's renewed talks with multiple interested teams in Anthony Davis. And then there was an injury report that Porzingis, Kennard, and Reza Shea were all going to be out last night. They're uh-oh, here we go. Zachary Reza Shea, you are a Dallas Maverick. That may not be the case, guys. If we're talking about exclusively expiring money, yeah, that would include, with Atlanta, that would include Porzingis, Kennard, and probably, again, a third smaller salary for Keaton Wallace or Mohamed Gay. Yeah, it not super easy because, the players that they want to move, like Porzingis and Kennard, that is not enough money for the deal to go through, right? Not enough salary matching for that to happen. So that's why they would have to include a third player. So then it's okay, well, the Mavericks are also going to send D'Angelo Russell, so it's easier to add that third player. I don't know, guys. So I'm saying if we're talking about AD and expiring contracts, this is kind of a weird path to go. The Clippers have been talked about because they have the $26 million expiring contract for John Collins. I looked at the rest of their roster yesterday, and I'm not seeing any other expiring contracts. Now, there are some short-term deals where, if we traded for Bogdan Bogdanovic, he would only be on contract for one more season beyond this one, right? So that's not you're committing long-term to an expensive contract. But if we're talking about truly just expiring money, that's what the Clippers have to offer, John Collins, okay? So it's going to be really difficult to work out a trade in that framework unless a third team gets involved. Then lastly, there's the Detroit Pistons, who have the expiring contracts of Tobias Harris and Jaden Ivey, and that's about $36 million. They would need to add another $7 to $8 million on top of that to match the incoming salary and for the deal to go through. So it's not my point in going through all of this is it's not going to just be expiring contracts, unless it's with Atlanta, because they have that Keaton Wallace, they have Mohamed Gay that they can attach $2 million kind of to the Kennard and Porzingis package. But I think it's going to be really interesting how creative some of these teams get if they are going to be making concrete offers for Anthony Davis. Because, if their whole mentality is like, well, he's going to come back before the playoffs, we're going to have a decent ramp up time to get him healthy and get some good reps on the floor with the, with first and second unit. Great. That's an exciting prospect. So the Mavericks could try and play into that. Okay, well, we want something to be excited about as well. And then the other team will be like, well, you can be excited about not having to offer that max contract extension. And that would be a fair point. The point is, again, nobody knows what's going on, but people that are kind of tapped into what's being talked about across the league are saying that likely the market is centered around expiring contracts. I think gone are the dreams of getting juicy draft picks or all of those other things that we've talked about for weeks and weeks now. Okay, I've now officially spent 15 minutes about Anthony Davis. There is a game tonight, y'all. Let's talk about that. We are facing off with the Denver Nuggets tonight at 7:30 p.m. Mountain, so that's 8:30 Central. And on the season, we are 2-0 against the Nuggets, and I believe slightly biased, called us contender merchants. And cool. I think that's kind of a fun title because every time we're going to play a title contender, we're going to look our best. And that has been the case so far this season against the Nuggets, against the Rockets, which, to be fair, are we considering the Rockets a title contender still? I don't know. You tell me. But since we're 2-0 against the Nuggets so far, it's worth asking, will the Mavericks keep the streak alive? I'm going to say no, but for two reasons. Okay, we will lose tonight for two reasons. One, the Nuggets are playing incredibly well without Jokic right now. It's insane. Players like Peyton Watson have stepped up and looked like a star. Adam Mares from the All-NBA podcast compared Peyton Watson to Jalen McDaniels in Minnesota. And I can totally see the comparison. They've got something special brewing in Denver right now with just that guy. But then, you've got some end-of-bench guys like Zeke Naji and Jalen Pickett. Those are also guys that are stepping up in a massive way, right? Where normally they would struggle to get any sort of offensive production whenever Jokic is not on the floor. Now, that is just simply not the case. They're getting some quality wins against teams like the Spurs, right? They beat the Celtics, right? They're winning games that they should not be winning, and they're not even barely eking it out either. They're looking really good as a roster, and so for that first reason, I think they win. And also, we need to lose, guys. If we're trying to increase our lottery chances, we need to be a little bit better at losing. Okay, and I will say, Jason Kidd knows what he's doing here. He knows that we need to lose. He knows that right now, especially if we move Anthony Davis and we don't see him in the Mavericks jersey again, there's not going to be a lot of winning prospects for the rest of the season. So we're going to see some funky things. Remember when we didn't see a true point guard on the floor for weeks? Remember when we were running our 18-year-old rookie at point guard when he'd never played point guard in his life? I think those are the kinds of weird decisions we're going to start to see more often because Jason Kidd knows the assignment, right? And if you're to believe any of the speculation that he's gunning for the GM role, well then he's not going to want to have his first draft pick be between 15 and 20. Right. He as a GM for you to come in and the first draft pick that you make is a lottery pick or even a high lottery pick at that top 5. Yeah, I see great incentive for Jason Kidd to be our tank commander here. So I think the recipe is tonight, we're going to keep it competitive. We're going to play hard start to finish, but we're still going to lose by 10, right? The scoreboard that I can see would be 112 to 102 in Denver's favor. But I'm not going to just sit here and say it's going to be an awful basketball game. I'm not going to say that we're not going to have some positives to take away, right? The other day, it was kind of the opposite. We won and things look good, but the takeaway is kind of negative. We should have lost that game, right? The Nets are just better at tanking than we are, I guess. But yeah, I see us keeping it competitive. We don't want to make it look too obvious that we're fully tanking here. But here, as far as individual performances, here's one bold prediction I'll throw at you. We're going to call it, you heard it here first from now on. And today's, you heard it here first. Coop and Najee are going to combine for 60 points tonight. 60 between those two. Okay. Coop is in nice form right now between, his aggressive attacking the basket. He's also finding his stroke in the mid-range. He is looking more confident from behind the three-point line, and, let him fire. Like let him rip is what I meant to say. Najee Marshall, the floater god, like he doesn't miss if it's inside 10 feet. Like I think he's going to be getting a lot of opportunities because without Jokic on the floor, there's not a lot of big bodies clogging up the paint. And I think that's where he does his best work. So yeah, 60 points between those two players. Another, you heard it here first. Klay Thompson is going to hit 6 3-pointers tonight. That's not even that wild of a prediction because, he did that the other day. I think it was like 5 of 8 or something like that. He is shooting the ball incredibly well. And it looks like Max Christie is doubtful for tonight with an illness. So all the looks that Christie would normally get, I think, Klay's going to get some of those back. So yeah, he's going to hit 6 3-pointers, maybe 6 of 10 from the line tonight. And then my last one, this one's kind of tough to say, but I do think that this will be Daniel Gafford's last game as a Dallas Maverick. He is showing that he's available tonight. They could come out last minute on the injury report and say that he's not going to play. But even if he does, I think it's going to be the last game that he plays because using Rich Paul's words, which, by the way, I don't understand this podcast that he and Max Kellerman are doing right now. Like Max Kellerman, I guess, is fun to listen to. Who wants to give Rich Paul a mic that often? But he said something interesting related to the Mavericks and their attempts to trade Anthony Davis and then Anthony Davis getting hurt. He's like, I mean, they played in traffic and they got hit by a car. Like that's kind of a bar. That's kind of a bar, if I'm being honest. If you're the Mavericks front office and you are seriously considering moving Daniel Gafford by the deadline, can we not learn the same lesson over and over the hard way, right? Like they played with fire, they got burned. Anthony Davis is now going to be out for a long time. Don't do the same with Daniel Gafford. Maybe especially if he plays really, really well tonight, cool. Don't play him again. Even if he's not moved until the absolute buzzer for the deadline. Just don't let him get hurt, please. But guys, that's all I have for you today. The things I want to hear from you about in the comment section. What was your take on the back and forth reporting between Shams, Mark Stein, all the business about Anthony Davis? What do you think about Anthony Davis just sounding off on Twitter? I think it's cheesy. What do you think? Are you going to be super disappointed if all Anthony Davis brings the Mavericks in return is expiring contracts? If you're not all that disappointed with that, tell me which team that you preferred that we talked about earlier between Chicago, Atlanta, the Los Angeles Clippers, and the Detroit Pistons. Okay? And then lastly, do you think Daniel Gafford is going to play his last game as a Dallas Maverick tonight? But yeah, at the moment, we're at 80 subscribers, guys. The community is growing. We're having a good time with it. Share this video with your friends. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, comment, all of that jazz. I will see you around. Y'all party on.